everybody. Welcome to another weekly roundup of the news with Hell of a Way to Die. I'm Francis. I've been doing this once a week here on YouTube. I'm going to be putting them out on the main feed as well. So hopefully this visual medium is not too visual that you can't kind of understand what's going on. But I talk about everything that we have up here. So don't worry about it. Don't worry. If you're listening, you don't have to watch. If you want to look at me, though, you got to watch. If you want to see what I look like. A lot of people have been very surprised. I'm not sure why. I do not know what kind of face my voice gives off. I have always hated my own voice, but I believe everybody hates their own voice when they hear it recorded, and everybody else's know that's what you sound like. Because you sound different inside of your own skull. You sound much cooler, and you're not. So if you're looking to start a podcast, I'm sorry to tell you that you do actually sound like that. And it's okay, because we're used to it. We're used to how stupid you sound. Everybody's used to how stupid I sound. I've been doing this for almost 7 years. At some point in time, I imagine somebody would have come and punched me in the throat if I needed, specifically for how I sound, not because of my opinions. My opinions are all correct. You shouldn't be punching me for that. But let's go ahead and get into our news. We got a couple of things. We got two things that I wanted to talk about. One, Marines investigating video in which man claims body buried at Camp Lejeune. So my first instinct is only one. But this is a guy who went on TikTok and confessed to disposing of a body. He just went out there and said, yeah, I helped a couple buddies bury a body, and now everybody has to start digging up Camp Lejeune to find this guy. I'm not sure if this is a push for some kind of, maybe we can, if you build in this area, look for this body that I buried there, me and my buddies. Oh, you didn't find anything? Well, why don't you go ahead and lay down a foundation for a new barracks while we're here? Well, you've already dug all that shit up. I don't know. Maybe there actually was a murder. Very likely, because it is the Marines. It is Camp Lejeune. And I don't want to disparage the Marines any more than I already do. We're going to disparage them a little bit more later on. Don't worry. I do love my Marine brothers. Some of the coolest people in the military I've met were Marines. One of the coolest Marine I've ever met was a PAO who hated being in the Marines. He's the only Marine that ever made sense to me. He just fucking hated it. He's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I said, yeah, you should be PAO in the Army. We're not the Marines. There's not all that Marine nonsense going on. So we've got a guy who on TikTok is doing TikTok confessions, true crime confessions, I assume, getting really into Serial or Only Murders in the Building or any of the 900 other podcasts out there that basically read you a Wikipedia article and dig in a little bit into cold cases from when serial killers were running around because everybody was lead poisoned. We don't have those problems anymore. We still have serial killers, I'm sure, but not because they're lead poisoned. They're irony poison, more likely, is what we got to deal with. So we'll see what this ends up digging up. NCIS is looking into it. The Marine Corps is looking into it. You can't really just go onto social media and say to somebody, me and some homies buried a dead dude out here in the desert, and nobody look at it. This is federal ground. Like, if you had done this out, maybe it's like me and 3 guys went out in the middle of Death Valley at 2 o'clock in the morning and buried somebody in the middle of nowhere. The Marines don't give a shit about that. But as soon as you start digging up their shit, as soon as you break ground on Sergeant Major's grass, and I know there's not a lot of grass on Camp Pendleton. I was there once. There's not a lot of greenery happening out there. But I'm sure there's some patch somewhere. And hopefully that's where the body is buried. If you're going to bury a body, you should at least piss off a senior enlisted NCO in one way, shape, or form. That's my opinion. If you're going to do body disposal and you're going to do it on federal property, you might as well do it in a way where you get to fuck with somebody, especially a senior NCO. So next up, Navy SEALs. Gotta love them. God bless the Navy SEALs. They do more war crimes before 9 a.m. than most of the rest of us can pack in all day. So this has been a story that's kind of been coming. It's been coming. The testing of the Navy SEALs may unveil scale of performance-enhancing drug use and unleash legal battles. So, if you are in the military and you sign on the little dotted line, you say, I am not going to do drugs. And it gives you a big list of drugs you're not going to do. The big one for your average troop is marijuana. We all want to smoke weed. But it's got, cocaine, heroin, benzos, and things like that. Now, if you have a prescription, that's fine. They come back to you and they say, hey, we found X, Y, and Z in your blood system. You say, yes, I have a prescription. Everybody's fine. You go along your way. This does not work with weed prescriptions, kids. Don't try weed prescriptions. It does not work. This is not federalized yet. Because I have a prescription for weed in Missouri, I would not be passing any drug tests. So steroid drug testing, if you don't know, is, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I used to be a UPL, which is a unit prevention leader, which meant that when we had to do a urinalysis, when we had to do the big thing, I was the one who was in charge. Now, the upside to being the guy that's in charge is you don't have to go be a meat gazer, which is the people who have to go and watch people pee in cups. Because to standard, you are supposed to watch the urine leaving the body because they want to make sure that you are looking at the dick and that it's a regular dick, that it's a normal, perfectly normal dick that's supposed to be there. It's not, the wrong, I don't know. There's like weird inspection thing you have to do on the dick, but to make sure that nothing is being adulterated and nothing is being put into the urine sample, you need to have somebody who sits there and watches. Now, only once in my 20-year career, and I've peed in a lot of cups, but only once have I ever had somebody actually watch the urine leave the cup, because nobody wants to do that. Especially in like these cramped urinal places where it's just like, yeah, let me cram myself on in here with you. Certainly, the way to make you feel real comfortable about peeing is like my junk being about 5 inches from you. And you know what? You don't want to get too close. You start getting backsplashed. Like backsplashing yourself is fine. Every guy knows that it happens when you're peeing at a urinal. If you pee in a certain way, you're gonna get some backsplash. If you don't have one of those little splash hogs in the bottom of it. Now, and some of you, you do. You get pee on you when you use a urinal. Be okay with it. Like if you want to stand up and pee into a urinal, you're gonna get pee on you because it's gonna splash onto you. It's fine. That is all perfectly normal. But when you're the meat gazer and you're getting somebody else's pee splashed on you, no, red light. Stop that. Put it to an end there. So normally the normal drugs that we test for, everybody gets tested. Well, so what you do is when we were doing it, rules change obviously, but we would have to do 10 to 25% every quarter or so. And it was a randomized drug test. When we were part of a smaller unit, it was really difficult to do that because, we only had like anywhere between 6 to 12 people in the unit at any given time. So, but for your larger units, when you're doing these urinalysis, you're generally hitting, when I got to my last unit, which we had about 90 people in, I was not the UPL there, but we, at least when we had to pee in cups, we had a good 20, 25 people who were having to do it. So it makes it a little less annoying when there's more people. When it's just like one person, because there's just so much pomp and circumstance you have to go through to do the whole pee in a cup thing. So we test when you're peeing in the cup goes off. It gets tested for weed. It gets tested for cocaine, and it gets like 1 in 4. Like you take 4 samples, and then 1 gets tested for benzos, 1 gets tested for heroin, 1 gets tested for psychedelics, and 1 gets tested for something else. So they kind of round robin the rest of them, but everybody gets tested for weed. That's the one that stays in your system for the longest time. MDMA, I know they test for that as well. So that's kind of how it was done back then. You get the cup, you'd have to give 30 milliliters, which was about half the cup, and it had a little marker on the side. So you pee in the cup, you tap it off, you go and you distribute, you give it to the guy, and you're good to go. You go along your merry way. When you're doing steroid testing, though, steroid testing is not a thing that they just do randomly. Like, there are random drug tests, but for the 30 milliliter ones, because for anabolic steroids, you have to get 60 milliliters. I don't know why. I don't know why you need twice as much piss to get steroids. Nobody ever asked me, and I never asked anybody for 60 milliliters. Like, we never did that. But when you're testing for steroids, it's very specific. Like, you're testing for steroids because I think you're doing fucking steroids. That is there's no other reason. We don't just randomly do it. So the fact that they're going to start doing that in the Navy SEALs is huge because steroids are bad first off. Like, I smoke weed. I'm pro drugs. Put whatever you want in your system or whatever. Steroids are bad though, because it really fucks with your brain and your body. And Navy SEALs get blown up a lot, and they already have a lot of brain rattling going on. They don't need more brain rattling. They don't need whatever the fuck the anabolic steroids are going to start doing to their brains. So it's a good thing that they're going to start doing this. However, I'm gonna go ahead and read the statement from somebody here. Let's see. So they want to make sure that they have effective operators. There's a lot of people who agree. However, there's one person, an attorney who specializes in representing military clients, Tim Parlator, says the new testing policy runs the risk of severely damaging the entire Navy special warfare community. Quote, it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of resources. It's going to create a lot of distractions. Maybe. It's going to negatively affect unit readiness. Hold. Why is it going to negatively affect unit readiness? Because you fuckers have been doing steroids. And that's, again, I don't care what you put in your systems. Like, you want to do that and roid range out in the gym, fine. But don't go doing war crimes in my name about it. Like, I want the guys, like, weed should be not only legalized, but, compulsory almost. Yeah, jokingly, but like weed doesn't, it makes you lazy if you can't control yourself, which, hey, alcohol will do the same fucking thing. But steroids fucks with you. Like, it negatively impacts your body and your brain. So, and again, we're talking about Navy SEALs. So I'm interested. I'm going to be really interested to see where this comes out. Parlator represents a number of special operators and particularly Navy SEALs. Guess what? He represented Eddie Gallagher, the now retired Navy SEAL who was accused of war crimes by his former colleagues and ultimately acquitted of the most serious charges. So the worst person in the world is defending, not doing drug testing. So Take that as you will. I will take it to mean that this guy is a huge fucking asshole, and more than likely he doesn't want to do it because something's going to be found. And we should. Like, we're a peacetime army now. There's a lot of changes that are being made to the military. Very positive changes. Very positive in recruiting, retention, because recruiting and retention fucking suck right now. Nobody wants to get in. Nobody wants to stay in. There's a lot of reasons for them, which we've covered extensively. However, because we're a peacetime army, now's the time to really start cleaning some things up. Like, you remember how during the surge, we let just anybody in? Some of those people are still in. Like, we need to start clearing the ranks out a little bit. And I think that the clearing of the ranks and the turning down of the operational tempo, which I honestly do believe is something that's going to come eventually, because operational tempo is really high right now for no reason other than that's how people are used to it. Like, the people who are running things now, who are running operations, who are doing all the planning and everything, those are people who had high operational tempos during the war. The war's not happening anymore. So when your average E7 who has, 3 deployments maybe under his belt. Me, I had 2. One of those people stays in long enough, and we start to have some problems. Where am I going with this? Anyway, 3, 2, 1. So let's see kind of how this plays out. I feel like we're gonna clean some house, probably be good for us. Probably get some of the worst offenders out of there. But they're Navy SEALs, man. There's a lot of bad going on in there. There's a lot of things that are a lot of murders, a lot of guys holding their own families hostage. Maybe not a lot, but like twice is too many. And I don't think the force as a whole is doing that. So it's about time to start cleaning some house. We got to start with the Navy SEALs. We got to start with all the let everybody, Ranger and above, piss in a cup, give us 60 milliliters just once. No, rehab, nothing like that. But if you get caught with it, we'll give you I don't know, maybe they'll give you time. They'll give you a grace period. All right, look, you've got, I don't know how long it takes to get out of your system, but we're going to come back and test you randomly sometime in the next 3 months. So stop fucking shooting steroids into your butt or however those drugs work. I don't know how steroids work. If I spend an hour in the gym in the day, that's a long day for me. So I'm not the guy throwing up the big weights. I'm the guy who's doing like, look, my shoulders are still working perfectly at the age of 40. How wonderful for me. Well, all the younger, the guys like 25 with the wrestling t-shirts on and throwing up. Yeah. You know what? That's why I go at 6 o'clock in the morning, where it's also all other old middle-aged dudes who have better things to do during the day. So that's the news. That is the Navy SEALs. God help you boys, because the fucking Army won't. At least it fucking shouldn't. Okay, so here is what I have been reading and watching this past week. I've been turned on to a whole lot of different graphic novels that I will probably slowly start working my way through. Great conversations in the Discord. Somebody gave me a huge list of all kinds of stuff. I told them the ones that I like are, let's see, We Only Find Them When They're Dead. I've finished Saga. I've read some things. I've read a few things that aren't necessarily hero stuff. So, but this time somebody said, I should read this series, The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. I'm 40 years old. I grew up watching DuckTales and Rescue Rangers and Tailspin. All of these things, all three cartoons, kind of in the same universe, I want to say, the Duckburg extended universe. I don't know. So The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck is a series that was written and done by Don Rosa. He did 2 volumes of it. The first one is basically kind of what brings Scrooge to who he is as we know him. All the adventures that he had, making his riches, making fortunes and losing, making fortunes and losing. The issue, it's good. If you wanted to read some DuckTales stuff, if you want to not necessarily read something very serious, it's very well done. It's not silly and goofy, but it is fun. And if you know the characters, Scrooge, all of the, if you watched DuckTales when you were younger, like I did, it fits in with everything. So it does talk about his coming up. The issue that I have with it, though, is that Scrooge is an asshole, and you're reading this the whole way, just like with that kind of in the back of your mind. It's like he's going to turn into a miserly asshole, and that's just how it's going to be. So the first volume is him going from a kid with his earning his lucky dime. Or no, I'm sorry, his number one dime. It's not his lucky dime because he was never lucky. He was hardworking, good bootstrapping young man. So it goes from that up until the money bin, and it kind of has a 20 years later after Scrooge McDuck settles himself in Duckburg and then is just angry because he feels like nobody deserves to inherit his fortune because he worked really hard for it. So it does kind of jump forward 20 years. It's got Donald with Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and then it really kind of picks up from there. So I will also say the new DuckTales cartoon is pretty decent as well. If you have kids and you're looking for cartoons that aren't shit, the DuckTales cartoon, the newer one from 2017, is pretty good. So I would recommend this. And it's good graphic novel, good comic books. Sometimes you just want something a little goofy. So for watching, so I'm going to make a confession to you. I have never watched Voyager all the way through. I picked it up bits and bits. I watched Deep Space Nine a lot when I was a kid. When Voyager was in syndication, I was watching it, but I wasn't as into it. I don't know why. Voyager just didn't grip me. And to be honest, I wasn't that faithful to watching Deep Space Nine either. I liked it. I enjoyed the characters and I talked about them, but I never really sat down and did a full watch through until maybe about 10 years ago. It was all on Netflix. And it was before my daughter was born, and my wife was pregnant. And when there's a lot of preparation obviously to do before a baby, but there's also a lot of sitting and waiting because that's at a certain point when you're pregnant, that's all you want to do. So I watched a lot of Deep Space Nine during that time. I finished the first, dual episode of Voyager, and I really liked it. And it did give me that, kind of nostalgia back to Deep Space Nine and watching those. It's got the great music in it, the transition music with lots of trumpets and horns, but like very, very stoic and everything. It's just really that golden age of Star Trek in the 1990s. You had Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all really doing a lot of heavy lifting. And Voyager went 7 seasons. So there's a lot of people who say that it's not as good, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's got more misses than it has hits, but that's always been Star Trek in general, especially all of these. Like Deep Space Nine is 7 seasons as well, 26 episodes, 24 to 26 episodes per season. So you're talking over 200 episodes. Just a lot of fucking stinkers in there. Like, I would say most of season 2 of Deep Space Nine is completely irrelevant, unnecessary. And I would say season 1 is necessary because you should definitely watch Move Along Home. I am a Move Along Home defender. Alan Moraine all day long. It was a great concept. Everybody gets hung up on the hopscotch thing or whatever. So, but I've been really enjoying it. I watched the first episode and I'm hooked to watch more. So I'm going to add this into my rotation of things that I watch at work when I don't really need to pay that much attention to what I'm working on, but also don't need to pay that much attention to what I'm watching, I suppose. So, big love. Something else that I found out, Tim Russ, who plays Tuvok there, he's known for this, but like the thing that people really know him for is being the guy in Spaceballs who is combing the desert with the afro pick, yelling, "We ain't found shit." That's also Tuvok the Vulcan. So a fun little crossover there. Finally, another thing that I've been watching is The Imperfects. I just came across this on Netflix while I was, scrolling around on it. And it is kind of so far I've only watched 2 episodes. It is a genetic kind of, I don't want to say mutants, yes, but like not, I don't know. It's hard to explain because they're mutants, but they don't really have control over it, but I'm going to tell you that it's fun. It's kind of a dark humor to it. The kid there at the front, the Hispanic guy, he's great, and he's also the main character in One Piece, the live action One Piece on Netflix, which I also recommend. I've seen the first couple of episodes of that. That is a fun pirate show if you don't want to have Disney pirates. It's pirates, but a little bit of a twist on it, but still the fun big ships, cannons, and everything like that. So I'm personally watching this kid's career because I found 2 shows that I really like him in, so I'm going to kind of keep up on those. But Imperfects only has 1 season so far. Really good as far as I've watched. It could turn into a piece of shit later, but generally now when something is a 10 episode run, usually there's not as many stinkers. It's not the syndicated 26 episodes per year nonsense that Star Trek was doing. So they can pare it down a little bit. There's less, more taste, less filler, I guess, is how to describe that. So Imperfects, thumbs up, watch it. Voyager, go back and watch it with me if you want. Maybe I'll talk about some of the episodes a little bit. I don't know, maybe on these. I had this idea that my wife and I were going to start watching all of Star Trek from the very beginning, do 1 episode a week, and then do a podcast episode on it. And I sat down and I did the calculations on that, and it would take, if they stopped making Star Trek episodes right now, and not counting the animated series from the 70s, it would take 18 years for 1 episode a week. So probably it's a bit of a daunting task to take on. I think somebody could do it. I think somebody should. I think maybe it should be me. Maybe I can drag this out to an every one episode of Star Trek until, I don't know, the fucking heat death of the universe, I suppose. I would say we'll keep out the animated series, but we'll keep in the Lower Deck series because I'm a big fan of it. But I feel like that would be fun, and also probably a madness rune of some kind that would drive us insane. Either way, the content would be great. All right, y'all. This week we're reading from AFB, A 4-Year Bummer. Now, AFB also stands for Air Force Base. This is a zine that was put out by airmen. A lot of the zines that I talk about on here are written by airmen because air bases were all over the place. So air bases and naval bases, but of course there were Army and Marine as well. I haven't run into too many Marine, but I think that that's probably because Marine and Navy kind of gets rolled into one another all up and down California. So unless we're specifically talking about Pendleton, the Marines and the Navy kind of are one, as they should be, because I'm sorry, Marines, you are Department of the Navy. Ooh, the men's department. You're not a thing. You're wet troops. Go hold the beachhead and get chewed up by the incoming for you. So this is Chanute is a decommissioned airbase that was in Illinois, about 130 miles south of Chicago. So for those of you who only know the Midwest based on where Chicago is kind of in the middle, but like up near the top middle, but near all those kind of lakes and everything. So there's Chicago, down south, Chanute, and many other air bases as well. The military loves to find a big parcel of empty land and slap a military base in it. From what I can see, Chanute was used as technical training, so it wasn't necessarily an active air base for sending. It's in the middle of Illinois. They weren't sending sorties to Vietnam from there. However, everybody who is involved in this, in the military, in the Air Force, is directly or indirectly involved with Vietnam as well. This is 1970. This is August 1970, so this is still well within the Vietnam era when there was a lot of dissent in the ranks and there was a lot of people pushing back against the military. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Some of the ones in the past enlisted times have been post-Vietnam, but still important. They're still necessary to tell the enlisted, especially the junior enlisted story. But now we're kind of going back into the Vietnam era. So this is going to be all readings from a 4-year bummer. To keep up with my rating system, if you have been listening, this is one that was created and distributed only as long as it needed to be. So as long as the war was going on and as long as people were paying for subscriptions, this would come in. But there weren't advertisements. Some of them had advertisements. Some of them had hey, at the end, here's a cool camera you can buy, or here's where you can get insurance or something like that. And these zines also were meant for general distribution, but the ones that were on the California coast did a little bit better because they had a little bit more resources. They had a lot more military personnel to pull from, and it's California, it's the 70s, it's a bunch of fucking hippies. So if you were unlucky enough to be sent to a place that was not on the California coast, such as Chanute Air Base in Illinois, you kind of had to build your own thing. So this is one of the during the war zines. A lot of the stories were kind of pulled from other zines. This is all underneath the big Veterans Against the Vietnam War, VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. The VVAW, it was this big kind of umbrella that sat over a lot of these publications and gave a lot of them support. Let's start out with some squadron news. We've got the 69th, nice, the 50th, and the 54th. So, from the 69th, I would like to make a small mention of a large menagerie. This happens to be the military. The small mention is something that came about when our dorm was inspected last. Our squadron is a fairly lenient organization as compared to others. Being considerate of the men's wishes, the commander gave express permission that his men could paint their rooms to suit their own taste as long as the doors and ceilings were left alone. Now, let me go ahead and give you an aside here. This will end poorly. I understand that you think that you are giving them some kind of parameters to stay within because you're saying, do not paint the wall, the ceilings, or the doors. That is not enough. You need to give them a little bit more. So, continuing. Shortly after this, a brand new commandant of troops, Colonel Benson, came into being. On the day of inspection, the general checked a few rooms, and what he missed, the new commandant of troops didn't. They found several rooms that had been painted very colorfully. In the majority of these rooms, posters adorned the newly painted walls. This probably can be credited with the generating resentment from the inspectors. After the inspection, I spoke with one of the guys who had spent $30, half of his bi-monthly pay, on paint for his room. He also paid about $10 for posters. One of the posters was Dennis Hopper on his bike from the movie Easy Rider. When the common dope of troops walked into this particular room, the first thing he noticed was his poster. The common dope then sternly inquired, "Why does that man have his finger in the air?" One of the room's inhabitants readily replied, "Sir, he's pointing to an airplane. Ha ha ha." Well, so much for true humor. The walls still have to be repainted back to their original super drab color, and the posters will also be off the wall. At this point, I ask myself what the inspectors are afraid of. Paint and posters? No, they aren't. But you can damn well believe that the true freedom that these artifacts represent scare them. Either that, or they are begrudging others something that they can't have themselves. Well, that's all I have to say for now, except maybe God bless Uncle Sugar. He sure fucking needs it. From the California Kid. They don't allow you to paint the walls in the barracks. Because, fuck, you don't know what you're doing. Fuck you. No, stop painting things, soldier. Look, and I understand. Commander wanted to be cool. He wanted to be a little bit laid back. He wanted to give the troops a little bit of leniency. I'm surprised that it ended with a Dennis Hopper poster and not a pinup, but honestly, if the IG came in and saw a pinup, they'd probably be fine with that. Sexism in the 1970s was fine, but pushing back against the establishment, that was still a big no-go. Alright, so let's go to the 50th. Sing it again. 2 weeks ago, one of the TIs of the 50th decided it was appropriate for airmen to sing while they're on their return march from school. Needless to say, the majority of airmen felt this harassment unnecessary and proceeded to retaliate by composing their own squadron hit. This action brought an almost immediate halt to the forced vocal participation. If other squadrons are plagued by crooners with stripes, the round of the following might end their vigorous attempts when it comes time for a sing-along with the sergeant. We left Lackland far behind. Here at Chanute we did fine. Same old shine, same old spit, same old basic chicken shit. As a connoisseur of forbidden cadences, that is something that a drill sergeant, I feel, would have taught us. I certainly learned many marching songs that were anti-military and anti-establishment. Basically every cadence that I learned was about how much the military sucks. And maybe that's why I have a bad attitude. Maybe that's why I hated the military so much. I hated it so much I spent 20 years in. So who's the real fucking idiot here? But I like the idea. I do understand that there's sometimes as a guy who wants to march, you just left, right. Because when you're in school, they don't trust you, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, to get from point A to point B without getting fucking lost. And the thing is you would think, well, that's kind of silly. I'm an adult. But it's happened before. That's why we have to do it. That's why they do it. They don't have to do it, but they do it because while we understand 95% of all soldiers are probably normal, perfectly normal people who can follow directions, 5% of the military is a very large percentage. So you got to keep that in mind as well. All right, finally, the 54th. July was a month of continuous activity. On Saturday, the 18th, the squadron was marked to a mandatory fun place just in time for a certain general on base to come see his men enjoy themselves at the field. At least one airman was excused Friday by a TI and left home Friday. I believe TI is a technical instructor in the Air Force, so this is post basic training but pre-deployment. So this is for you Army folks, AIT, the Advanced Individual Training. While we Army folks had drill sergeants, even in our later, Advanced Individual Training, it doesn't seem like these guys did. But I had look, the military of 50 years ago was different than the military of 20 years ago, which is different than the military of today. That's the only way that I can really explain how all of this works. Another airman with less luck wanted to leave on the 23rd to be with his wife, as she had a baby. The commander initially denied the request. A chaplain was contacted and asked the commander to call the commandant of troops. After going back to his ball game, the commandant changed the commander's mind, but too late for the airman to be near his wife when she had their baby. The brothers in the squadron are being hassled, as is typical. One was threatened with 30 days in the stockade if he didn't get a haircut. Needless to say, his hair is neatly trimmed and tapered. On the 25th, another airman was shoved around by the first sergeant of the 58th. His answer to a few harmless pings aimed at the squadron was to physically threaten and call the airman boy. As the first sergeant said, "People, this sort of thing hurts the squadron." The month ended with the commander's call. Mustaches may now be grown, as allowed by AFR 35-10, paragraph 126-1, and short-sleeve shirts may be worn, once everyone in the whole squadron gets them. Progress was made, but it is obvious that the first sergeant still runs the squadron, and it's doubtful that he will ever understand that until he conceives of airmen as men, they will continue to act as boys in his eyes. So racism obviously is rampant in the military today, not as bad as it was back then, but back in the 70s, it was a lot worse. Usually African American soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and whatnot were put in stockades for expressing opinions, for not wanting to be drafted to go to a war that they wanted nothing to do with. All the reasons why people would say, hey, this is kind of fucked and I don't want to do it. And also, we can also see the problems with leadership, not letting somebody go and be there for the birth of their child. So a lot of legitimate complaints in this one. I'm going to have to give it to this guy from the 54th here. This is some fucked up stuff. But it is, you get mustaches now, and I guess short sleeve shirts, as long as everybody's got the short sleeve shirts. So, you gotta find the little things in life. All right, let's do a lifer of the month. So, lifers of the month, the lifer is the person who is doing beyond their initial hitch in the military. Usually, if you're drafted, it was for 1 year. You get drafted, you train, you deploy, and then you come home. For if you were enlisting, it's usually 2 or 4 year hitches. So lifers were the ones who were not just doing their first hitch and leaving. So this is, I would like to submit a nomination for Lifer of the Month. His name is Master Sergeant Greer of the Base Dental Clinic. He has been in the Air Force for almost 30 years. The reason I feel he should be Lifer of the Month is that he and the Colonel go through the dental clinic every Friday for inspection, and he always manages to find something wrong with every room, while the high-ranking Colonel doesn't say much. Once he was so desperate to write up a black man that he didn't like that he wrote him up for having his floor too shiny. Another nominee is a relatively harmless four-striper. He sees the absurdity of the regulations he strictly enforces. Otherwise, he would not wear fatigues which look like they have been slept in, or perhaps he would take the decals off of the rear windshield and the plastic octopus who waves a flag off of his rearview mirror. Our nominee has distinguished himself in drilling his squadron. He has marched the squadron into an airplane, literally, ka-thump. Look, marching drills are hard, alright? It's hard to predict lefts and rights. Now, I have never run into an airplane. I had trouble if you ever had to do marching inside of a box. The box marching fucking sucks. I hate it. And he reached new height one morning when he sent half of the squadron around one side of a parked car and the other half around the other side. Hell yes. You know what? Move with the environment, okay? Suggestions for improvement. He should learn how to do commands by his numbers. He's forgotten. His ideas are original. Is there any other squadron who has been told to throw flashlights at cars passing the formation without permission? Unfortunately, the road guards are still undecided whether to salute officers before or after breaking their windshields. These things are trivial, but if he strikes another airman, the IG will be contacted. Who is this man? You guessed it, Uncle Freaky. Some GI movement news. Number 1, Marines blind themselves. July 31st, Chicago Daily News. Marines at Camp Pendleton may be deliberately blinding themselves to avoid being sent to Vietnam. Medical World News, a publication distributed to doctors, said on July 30 that some military and civilian investigators at Pendleton, quote, strongly suspect, end quote, that cases of blindness have been self-inflicted by gazing at the sun in order to obtain discharges before being shipped to Vietnam. About 300 cases of favio-muscular retinitis, an eye damage that results in a hole in the area of the retina involved in acute vision, have been reported at both Camp Pendleton, California, and the Marine Boot Camp in San Diego. Partial blindness caused by staring at the sun causes central vision to be irreversibly destroyed while peripheral vision is maintained, the journal reported. Next, Black Vietnam veteran refuses second tour and gets 2 years. Tacoma, Washington. Bill Thompson, a decorated Vietnam veteran, was sentenced to 2 years of hard labor for refusing to return to Vietnam for a second tour of duty after a 3-hour court-martial on June 10th. Thompson, a black career soldier with 6 years of honorable service, gave this reason for his refusal. Quote, after much research into the war, and according to my own moral values of right and wrong, I decided that the war is illegal and immoral, and that I shouldn't be responsible for the deaths of innocent people in Vietnam, end quote. It is apparently the attempt of the Army to make an example of Thompson to the many other NCOs who are beginning to resist the war. The prosecution, when arguing for sentencing, warned the court-martial board that whatever they did in the courtroom would go beyond this room, and that Bill Thompson is an exemplary soldier who would influence other men. After the court-martial, before he was taken away to the stockade, a fellow soldier, a private, walked up to him and said, "Just think, Bill, your sentence is only 4 times as great as the guys who killed Vietnamese civilians." Now, next up, we've got a few other little humorous tidbits that get thrown in by some of the airmen who are putting this together. This first one is called A Lifer's Prayer. "Our honcho, who art in Washington, hallowed be thy fame. My promotion come, thy will be done, in the Air Force as it is in Texas. Give us this day our daily bennies, and make us not civilians, but deliver us from reality. For thine is the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, forever and ever. 10 Hut." Now, I was raised Catholic, so we don't have all that nonsense in the back end of it. So I assume this was a Protestant one doing that, just so that everybody understands where we're standing here. Next one, 23rd Air Force Reg. "The Air Force is my crutch. I shall not think. It alloweth me to lie down on responsibility. It leadeth me blindly. It destroyeth my initiative. It leadeth me into the path of parasites for my country's sake. Yes, though I walk through the valley of laziness, I shall fear no lack of achievement, for APRs are the power and the glory forever and ever. Airmen." And finally, the Air Force 10 Commandments. "Thou shalt not think. Thou shalt not place thy hands in thine own pockets. Thou shalt not laugh at second lieutenants. Thou shalt not use words beyond the comprehension of NCOs. Thou shalt not do things in a irresponsible manner. Thou shalt fear the higher rank and scorn those of the lower rank. Thou shalt covet thy lifer's stripes. Thou shalt not speak without using profanity. And finally, thou shalt believe in the non-existing Air Force bennies." Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for watching, however you are taking this in. We appreciate it. This week, we released a bonus episode that I called Pick It Up, because I have Tom, Irish Tom, our producer, and Carrie, Boston Carrie, come on. Shocks, as you know him, come on to the show. We all picked a music album that was influential to us as teenagers. So I picked Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt, because it's the first CD I ever bought, and I really loved like that. I have a very weird range of music from my teen years, which if we continue this, you will discover a little bit more of. But I picked Tragic Kingdom, safe pick that I really like. I always was a big fan of No Doubt when I was a teenager. Tom picked City of Evil by Avenged Sevenfold. I'm not. It's nerd rock to me. It just sounds like nerdcore to me. There's a lot of guitars going on. There's a song about a snake called Sidewinder. So, I'm not knocking it. It's just not for me. And then Carrie brought us Duckbucker, 22 songs you'll never want to hear again. If you're like, who the fuck is that? It's a fucking Boston punk band from the 90s. So go figure. Next time we'll try to get something a little bit more, national than localized there. But we're also going to say that I said influential. I did not say good. There's so many other things that were hugely influential to me, like Tool, Anima. And it's kind of embarrassing, but 9 Inch Nails too. But also the Aquabats and Goldfinger. So, it's all over for me. Got a lot of good interviews coming up. So on the live shows, not the live shows, on the regular, on the free shows. Got a lot of great interviews coming up on the regular shows. Looking forward to that. A lot of great stories, a lot of great things coming out pretty soon. So, and of course, if you guys have any suggestions, if you think that you might be great for the show, if you have a story that you might want to tell, please contact me, Sergeant Joker at hellofawaytodie.com. You can also find me at Army Strang on Twitter. The Hell of a Way Twitter account is also available there for you if you want to do that. One way or the other, reach out to us and we'll find a way to fit you in. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.